So she has studied like flour, sugar, all these substances that are changed from like a plant form into an addictive substance. Basically, it's very, very interesting. So she has this test on her website. It's called the susceptibility test, I think. So basically it tests like how susceptible you are to become addictive to flour, sugar, like those type of substances. So it's very, very interesting. So I am a 10 on her test. So I am one of those people that it's very hard for me to just stop at one cookie or whatever we're comparing it to. So like
that's actually me too.
Yeah. So once I start eating sugar, it is like a cycle that I have to actually like become so aware of to pull myself out of. And I will eat to being uncomfortable. And it's not about that I deprive myself. I literally like stay away from those foods because I know, number one, they don't make me feel good. And number two, I know it's really hard for me to get out of the cycle of eating them when I know they're, even though my brain knows they're not good for me, but that dopamine is so strong that I want to continue eating them.
Hi guys, I am your host, Megan Van Dievender, and this is the Empowerhood podcast. Empowerhood is all about empowering women no matter where you are and what season you are in life right now. We provide encouragement, inspiration, and resources to get you through anything that you might be going through. Tune in and listen to so many incredible stories from women that have failed, celebrated, thrived, made mistakes. We can all learn from each other to become the best versions of ourselves. Thank you so much for being here. Enjoy this episode.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for being here. So everyone out there listening today, we have Kayla Radliff from, I said your last name right? Kayla Radliff, not Cliff.
Yeah. Don't worry.
I really want to say Cliff. But yeah, so Kayla Radliff from FitFilled is here with us today. And Kayla, thank you so much for coming on. The past couple of weeks, we've been kind of talking about body image a little bit, and I keep coming across this statistic of 91% of women are unhappy with their body. So I really wanted you to come on today and just give us some crucial information of, you know, reasons why we might be stuck not being able to lose weight, stuck with really poor energy, you know, not great sleep, all these things. So I wanted to tackle a couple subjects with you today that you can give us some really great insight and kind of clarify things that we might hear a lot but might not fully understand. So why don't you start with telling us a little bit about you and your business? Who is Kayla?
Sure. Yes. So hi, everyone. I'm Kayla Radliff. I own an online business called FitFilled. And I actually am a co-owner with my stepfather, Vin. We started this business back in 2018. And it's an online fitness and nutrition coaching program. And, you know, I'd like to think that our approach is much different than most popular weight loss programs out there. So, you know, instead of pushing extreme dietary restriction or exhausting workouts, which a lot of programs do nowadays, which I'm sure you know often leads to, you know, persistent fatigue, irritability, and honestly just results that don't last. We focus on building sustainable habits, essentially a new way of life to provide results that do last and improve long-term health at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that explanation because, I think obviously there's so many different ways to lose weight or to become healthier, but they're not sustainable. That's why you and Vin, I always turn to you guys, you know, if I personally need help or for clients, because I know your approach works. And it's also, I feel like, really eye-opening and just seeing kind of what we're going to talk about today, like what foods to actually eat and what is actually going to benefit your body and your energy type of way of living.
Right. Because, you know, another big thing too is that there's so many programs out there now that are just like quick fix, you know, diets, or here, follow this meal plan for 6 to 8 weeks, but you're not learning anything. And then at the end of the program, you're like, okay, well, now what? You know, like, what do I do now? So it's so important to like educate as you're going through this program, so that, like, you know, our whole thing is like, by the end of the program, we want you to be able to learn everything that you need to be able to sustain it on your own for the rest of your life. It's not just a quick fix. Like, we're talking about the rest of your life here.
Right. Well, and I think that's like that's why diets don't work, right? Because you sustain or you deprive yourself of certain things for so long, or you're not learning, the reason why you're eating these certain foods for this amount of time. And then the diet ends, and then it's like, all right, well, I'm just going to go back to what I was eating before. And it doesn't work. You gain the weight back or more. So I think just understanding the human body and what's actually going on. And that's what I want to talk about today. And because I think a lot, especially for women, I think we're up against a lot in this culture, in this world right now, that first of all, the information is just not there. And second, we're misinformed. So I wanted to talk about processed food today. And just because I know you and Vin are, you're, I don't know what the right word is, but the mission of your company is to educate people on real nutrient-dense food, right, Kayla? And just like why this is so important for the human body to get these foods. So I don't know if you want to touch base on that first, and just like the reasoning why processed food should never replace, real food that is grown outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And so process is a pretty vague word, but like for the purpose of what we're going to be talking about today, it's typically foods that come in packaging and have a fairly long list of ingredients, and often including unnecessary and potentially harmful additives. So examples of some of these foods, typically things like chips, crackers, cookies, pasta, bread, but also some common things that people don't realize that they're having literally like every single day. Like protein bars, flavored yogurts, deli meats. But I just want to say, like, I don't want to try to scare people that like you can absolutely never have these kinds of foods.
Right.
What it really comes down to is a majority of your diet being whole foods and keeping the processed foods to a minimum, which I'll obviously get a little bit more into. And, there's just several problems when it comes to processed foods. And I think one big problem is that they're intentionally designed to taste better. Another word for this that people may or may not have heard of before is called hyperpalatable. So the problem with this is that it makes these foods super easy to overeat, which is why so many people struggle with their weight, because they can't put it down. It's just, they just keep going and going and going. There's not a lot of nutrients that's keeping them full. So, I think that is probably one of the bigger issues when it comes to processed foods, but they are often high in what's called refined carbs. So this is just a carbohydrate that is more readily digested and causes bigger blood sugar spikes. Which ultimately leads to greater potential for insulin resistance and its associated complications, which later on in the podcast, I know we will get further into insulin resistance and what that is. And then kind of like just what I mentioned before is that processed foods are a lot less nutrient dense. So per calorie, there's less variety and smaller amounts of vitamins and minerals than what's typically found in whole foods.
Right. So, I mean, it's kind of like, it might taste good, but it's not nourishing our body the way it should. It's also not filling us up. So then we want to eat more of it. It's addictive substances. So we eat too much of it, but we're not gaining anything from it. That's what you're saying, right?
Right. Exactly. And again, so sticking to a mostly whole food diet is what's going to be most important, obviously, for overall health and longevity. And, these are foods like meats, seafoods, fruits, vegetables, nuts, that all have just one single ingredient. So, for example, you go to the grocery store, you pick up an avocado, you don't turn it around and there's a whole list of ingredients. It's just an avocado. It's one single ingredient. But again, I just, to reiterate, perfection is also not sustainable. So no one is expected to eat a 100% all whole food diet. I mean, that's just like almost impossible.
Yeah.
So again, it's just, it's about eating these whole foods for a majority of your diet and keeping the processed foods to a minimum.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how you said that people don't even know that they're eating them, because I come across that a lot. Clients will be like, well, I don't eat processed food. And then I take a look at their food journal and I'm like, but this, and this is actually processed. So how do you find the difference? Like, what's a great way to describe that? Like, how do you know? The ingredient list, or like what would be processed and what would not be processed?
So again, it's kind of hard to really go super in depth with it because process is such a like vague, basic word. And honestly, there's a lot of processed foods out there. And really what process is just like altering a food from its original state.
Right.
So you could go like really, into it and like, you don't want to be too strict about it. Cause like, obviously, there's a lot of healthy foods that are considered processed. But I think what we're more so talking about is like the more, like we talked about earlier, like these packaged items that just have a long list of ingredients that you could barely pronounce the names of.
Yeah.
So I think really just like when you go to the grocery store, I know, I'm sure a lot of people here like try to stick to the perimeter of the grocery store. That's typically where most of your whole foods will be. And try not to spend too much time in those middle aisles. Obviously, yes, you are going to go through those middle aisles and grab some things that you need. But again, I think just, looking at your diet as a whole and being like, okay, like how much of these packaged items am I having every single day? Right. And just, and really just trying to get more of the proteins in and the fruits and the vegetables and nuts and everything like that.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I think, like, I feel like when you go into those middle aisles and you're reading, even in like the health food aisle, and it's like processed food and you're reading the label, it's like we're all busy, right? So it's like we want to find those quick foods where we don't have to go cook, a vegetable or something like that. And I think that's a lot of time where we get really pulled towards these like processed foods, where even though they're considered, health in the health aisle, but they might still have those ingredients that we don't recognize or we can't even pronounce. Like, so obviously we're going to eat some processed foods. Like, Kayla, are there some that are more okay than others, or like, how do you define that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of tough, but I would say like our main thing with our clients is that we just want to see, again, that they're eating mostly whole foods, which, again, is the meats, seafood, veggies, fruits, nuts. But, say someone is struggling to get their protein and they are incorporating things like deli turkey meat, which, isn't the best option, but we would much rather see someone hit their protein goals with something like that, rather than not get close to hitting their protein for the day. Right. So there's little things like that, that, we kind of look for first. And obviously everyone's different. Everyone's at different points in their lives. Mm-hmm. Everyone has different things going on in their lives. Some people are so busy to where they literally can't even think straight between their kids and the sports and school and everything like that, and their jobs. And then you have some people who are like, all right, I want to really like zone in, and I want you to tell me like, exactly like, okay, I'm going to buy all this organic and I'm going to buy it. So, you kind of have to meet people in the middle too, for where they're at, and just kind of like take things little by little. Like, it's all about small habits over time. Yes. Because if you try to change too much at once, that's when people typically feel overwhelmed and they just want to quit. Right.
And you get burned out. If you're going too hard, too fast, you can't sustain it.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like going back to, I wanted to touch really quick on what you were mentioning before too, about the labeling. So that's like, I mean, processed foods, like they're all about marketing and all about the labeling. Mm. So, things like, I know a lot of people, they look for like whole grain, whether it's like pasta or cereal, organic, obviously is a big word. Yes. And then all natural, things like that. Does not necessarily mean that it's healthy. Right. So I think people can easily be tricked by marketing, which rightfully so. I mean, there's just so much about nutrition that people don't know. So they are going to look for those keywords and stuff like that because they do think that it's healthy. But in reality, most of it, it's still processed food.
Right. And I think just like you said, like, 80% of your diet should be at least whole foods, right? Would that be like, what percentage do you guys shoot for with your clients?
Yeah, so we typically like 80, 85%. And again, it's like depends on the client. Everyone's different in terms of how much they can kind of like handle in their life right now.
Yeah.
But again, it's you know, it's like if you have a lot going on, all right, let's just zone in on a few small things to focus on.
Yeah.
You know, like, and maybe that's all they can focus on for a couple weeks until they, you know, feel comfortable and confident with those changes. Then, you know, kind of add more into that from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I love what you brought up about when you start to eat these processed foods, like how they can be addictive and you overeat them accidentally. And I feel like that's very, very common. And I mean, I think there's so much great information out there now with social media and the internet, but a lot of times we don't put it to ourselves, right? Like, how are we going to do with eating this? Can you eat this in moderation? Can you eat one cookie and not the whole box type of thing? And I think that happens a lot. And that, because we think I should be able to do that. But if you can't, and that's okay if you can't, like, how do you go about that with clients? So is that where you're kind of like meeting them where they're at? Like when you say like, oh, well, obviously it's not realistic to never eat processed food, right? But like, how do you get them out of that cycle of starting to eat a processed food and then not being able to stop and like eating a whole box of cookies type of thing?
Right. Because like, you know, going back to everyone's different, like, yeah, there's some people that can grab a box of cookies, have one or two and be done.
Yes.
But there's some people who literally can't.
Yeah.
And so that's why it is kind of tough to tell everyone, oh, everything's okay in moderation, because a lot of people do struggle with that moderation part, because once they start, they can't stop.
Yes.
So, and I will say, so some, but not all. So some processed foods do actually stimulate the reward system of your brain, similar to addictive drugs, which is actually insane.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, so the super good taste of these foods just keeps you eating well past the point of being full, you know, to a point of feeling uncomfortably stuffed and bloated.
Yeah.
So, but like what I find is, like, once we start working with a client and we start to slowly incorporate more whole foods and less processed, or even just swapping some of the processed foods for a little bit more favorable options, their bodies actually just start to adapt to these changes. And actually your taste buds do adapt over time. So the more that you are focusing on having these whole foods and less processed foods, your taste buds are going to adapt, your body's going to start to adapt, and you're actually going to crave less and less processed foods as you go along.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, the brain is so amazing. Do you know Susan Pierce Thompson? So she does Bright Line Eating. Have you ever heard of it?
I don't think so.
So she is a psychologist that studies how the brain reacts to food, basically. Okay. So she has studied like flour, sugar, all these substances that are changed from like a plant form into an addictive substance, basically. It's very, very interesting. So she has this test on her website. It's called the susceptibility test, I think. So basically it tests like how susceptible you are to become addictive to flour, sugar, like those type of substances. So it's very, very interesting. So I am a 10 on her test. So I am one of those people that it's very hard for me to just stop at one cookie or whatever we're comparing it to. So like
that's actually me too.
Yeah. So once I start eating sugar, it is like a cycle that I have to actually like become so aware of to pull myself out of, and I will eat to being uncomfortable. And it's not about that I deprive myself. I literally like stay away from those foods because I know, number one, they don't make me feel good. And number two, I know it's really hard for me to get out of the cycle of eating them when I know they're, even though my brain knows they're not good for me, but that dopamine is so strong that I want to continue eating them. So it's a very interesting quiz. You should check her out. She's cool. I mean, some of the stuff I don't agree with, but like her studies are mind blowing. And it really just like, it relates so hard to like us and when we can't stop like that, because I'm always like, oh, well, what's wrong with me? Why can this person stop at one cookie and I can't? And she breaks it down to be like, it's actually not your fault. It is like the ingrained patterns in our brains that just keep coming back to that feeling of, like you said, like an addictive drug, that it remembers how it felt and it wants to go back to that. But amazing news, you can create new brain waves, like you said, neural connections, all that stuff, taste buds. So you can create new patterns and, you know, basically rewire your brain. It's never going to go away, but it gets much, much easier because you are going to start craving that food that actually benefits your body.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's literally the same for me. And like, when I tell people that, they're like, what? No way. Like, you're a health and fitness coach. Like, and I'm like, no, I literally, like, if there's fresh baked chocolate chip cookies around me, forget it. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm going to eat several of them.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that I deprive myself of these things. But you know, I just try not to have them around me often, because I know myself and I know that I am going to overindulge and I'm going to feel like crap after. And what's really good about like being healthy a majority of the time is that when you do cave into these foods and you do happen to overindulge, which happens to everyone, your body will tell you, like, you will feel like crap, and like, you'll be like, okay, this is why I don't do this often. But the thing about, like, so certain people, if they're so used to eating processed foods all the time and eating stuff like this all the time, they're like, when they're feeling like crap is their normal.
Right.
So they don't really know what it feels like to be healthy and to feel great, because they haven't really gotten to that point yet. But when you get to that point and you get these slip ups every once in a while, like, your body will tell you. And I think that's like the greatest reminder to get right back on track.
Yeah, totally. You crave it. I know I do. Like, I mean, say the holidays, it's Christmas, you know, we have whatever is going on, the yummy treats. And it's like, I can't wait to get back onto my regular routine of just like, you know, eating healthy, because I know my energy is so different and my sleep is different and my exercise is different. Even my mood is different, I feel like, when I'm eating that stuff. And it's not that I'm not enjoying it. I am. I just know I can feel better when I'm eating things that benefit my body better.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, same thing. Like, when I go on vacation for a week, you know, obviously, yes, I am mindful a little bit, but I mean, I'm having like pina coladas and I'm like, we're going out to eat all the time. And then like by the end of the week, I'm like, oh my God, I cannot wait to get back home and get to my regular routine, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like, I mean, as coaches, I think that's what we do for people, right? We find their best health for them, so they know what that feels like. So you can sustain these habits, you know, for a long period of time and want to do it, you know, it's because it makes you feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So now that we're talking about addictive substances, let's talk about insulin resistance, insulin sensitive. So this is like, I feel like this has been coming up a lot lately, and I'm seeing it a lot on Instagram and stuff. And like, I feel like a lot of people have no idea what it means. So go ahead, Kayla.
Yeah. And actually, it's funny. We just posted an Instagram yesterday a little bit about it. But yeah, so first I just want to kind of explain why insulin itself is important. So insulin's main function is to cause glucose transporters in the muscle cells to move to the cell membrane, which is like that outer layer. And this enables the transport of glucose, which is sugar, from your blood into the muscle. So insulin resistance is when this process doesn't work as well as it should, which is going to result in more glucose, aka sugar, staying in your blood. And when this happens, insulin levels start to rise above their normal levels in order to compensate for these elevated glucose in your blood. And the problem here is that insulin actually inhibits the breakdown of body fat, which is the exact opposite of what you want to happen when you're trying to lose weight. But another important factor here is glycogen. So glycogen is actually a carbohydrate that's stored in your muscle and liver. And what's important to understand here is that the body has a limited capacity to store this glycogen. So that means when storage is full, your muscle will become more resistant to insulin, which, I just described that it will result in higher glucose levels and in turn, higher insulin levels. And that's going to make it more difficult to lose body fat. And I know that's kind of like super sciencey. So I think like thinking of it as this analogy, I think will help a lot of people. So your body's capacity to store carbohydrate is kind of like your bathroom sink. So running the faucet is like eating carbohydrate. If the sink is full, the running water is going to flood your bathroom, just as eating a lot of carbohydrate when your muscles are already full of glycogen will increase blood sugar and insulin to a greater degree.
Okay.
So that I feel like kind of thinking of it that way helps it put into perspective a lot. I know there's like a lot of science behind it, but I think that analogy like helps people really understand like what's happening in the body.
Yeah, because it is really sciencey, and I think like when you see it, your eyes kind of glaze over when you keep seeing it thrown around everywhere. Like insulin, what is insulin sensitive? What is resistant? And we go to read it, and we're like, all right, I still don't really know what this means. So I guess like what causes this? Like so. To become insulin resistant, are you eating too much processed food? Like what causes this to happen?
So there's a lot of things that can cause it to happen. Genetics is one of them. But yeah, so honestly, eating a lot of carbohydrate and not exercising a lot are probably the two biggest. Because again, when you're eating, your body's turning that into glucose, which is going through your blood, and then insulin's going to rise. And if you're constantly eating processed foods, which is a lot of refined carbohydrates, your levels are just staying up and up and up, and your body's still trying to produce this insulin to bring it down, and your storage is full, so it literally can't, bring it down.
Right.
And so then your body, it's going to hang on to body fat for fuel.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Do you know what being insulin resistant like feels like? Have you ever been insulin resistant?
I don't think I've personally ever been insulin resistant. I mean, maybe years ago before, I got into the health industry. Maybe I was like back when I was like in college, just eating whatever the heck I wanted and didn't really, realize things like this, because I think this is also something that's becoming more popular, like more readily researched, and people are becoming more aware of it now. Whereas like years ago, you never really heard of it ever.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure people are probably thinking like, well, how the heck can I fix this? Or, if I have it, like, what can I do?
Yeah.
So kind of like what I just mentioned of like what can cause it. So there's two really powerful ways to prevent insulin resistance from happening. But I did want to mention, like, before I talk about the two ways, so more than half of Americans are insulin resistant to the point of being pre-diabetic or diabetic. Add to that the many people who are insulin resistant, but short of it being pre-diabetes. And you can see that this is something that applies to a large majority of people.
Yes.
And sadly, a lot of these people are insulin resistant and have no idea.
Yeah.
But like the reason why this matters so much is because insulin resistance is not only a major risk factor for diabetes, but also other chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, dementia, cancer. So it has a major influence on your health and quality of life. And I feel like a lot of people don't quite understand that yet.
Yes.
Other than like what it does to your body. Like there's just so many things that this insulin resistance can lead to. But the two ways that you can pretty much make all of this avoidable risk go away is to exercise appropriately and eat less carbohydrate. So kind of going back to that sink analogy, exercising is like opening the drain of the sink, which will allow it to hold more water without overflowing. So your muscles are able to hold more of this glucose. And eating less carbohydrate is like lessening the flow of the faucet. So making the potential for a flood less likely, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. And, I think a big thing too, when I say appropriately for exercise, you can't just exercise like a lunatic chasing calories. That'll burn you out and potentially just honestly leave you worse off than when you started. And the appropriate type of exercise and extent of decrease in carbohydrate intake can honestly vary pretty widely between person to person. So this is why personalized coaching becomes so important because, like I said, everyone's different. Everyone's at different parts of this, and some people are insulin resistant, some people aren't. So in our coaching programs, we walk people through the process of figuring out what's best for them specifically, and then we adjust according to their progress as they go along.
Yeah, that's huge. What are some of the main symptoms of insulin resistance that people should be kind of looking out for?
So again, there's some people who actually might look healthy and have insulin resistance. So it doesn't always matter if like you're overweight. I mean, overweight is obviously going to be a big symptom. Your waist measurement, and I'd have to double check with Vin on this, on the exact measurement that indicates, if you're kind of on that threshold of being insulin resistant. If you're just carrying a lot of body fat around your belly, that's a good indicator of being insulin resistant. But also if you just if you're kind of like trying everything and like you're exercising and you think you're eating healthy, nothing's working, that might be a big sign that you're insulin resistant. And I know a lot about this, but one night of bad sleep can literally make you insulin resistant the next day.
Yeah.
So even if you're a super healthy individual and you aren't insulin resistant, most of the time, if you have one night of bad sleep, you can literally put yourself into insulin resistance the next day because your body's going to be producing more insulin with the cortisol levels and everything like that. Right. So it's crazy. I mean, it's just like crazy. There's so many factors that come into play.
Right. Yeah. That's great. No, I think that's great information. And I love putting that out there because, like I said, I think people kind of feel stuck if they are stuck not being able to lose weight, or if they're stuck with just not loving how their body is. I think knowing that, especially the sleep thing, and just there's simple ways that you can change it. You're not stuck being, having diabetes or being pre-diabetic, that type of stuff. You can actually reverse this with just a healthy lifestyle.
Right. And I think a lot of people too, they think, all right, eat less carbohydrate. Oh my God, I have to go keto. No, you don't have to go to that extreme. Yeah. And I think a lot of people think low carb sometimes is a lot lower than it has to be. But again, it will vary person to person. So there might be someone where we do need to go pretty low on the carbohydrates to get them out of the insulin resistance. And there's some people who maybe we need to lower just a little bit, and then they're good to go. Right. There are ways you can test for this. It's not something I'm super aware of. It's more so Vin that he knows exactly what you should be asking in terms of blood work and stuff like that to look at numbers for this.
Yes.
So that's something that I could ask him more about if anyone is interested in getting tested to see if this is something that you could potentially be, something that you're dealing with.
Right. Now, does blood sugar have to do with insulin resistance? So, if your blood sugar is spiking, that type of stuff with certain foods, do you ever look at that, or does that have anything to do with that?
Yeah. So, obviously, so when you eat, your blood sugar will rise no matter what, pretty much. But there's certain foods that will spike it a lot more than others. Which is typically foods that are high in carbs and high in sugar. So when you're eating a lot of these foods that are spiking your blood sugar a lot, your body is producing more and more insulin. Yeah. And like we talked about earlier, eventually your storage is going to be full in your muscles and your liver. So then, it's just going to be stored as body fat, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So there are certain foods that will spike blood sugar more than others. And there's also, you could have one food that spikes someone's blood sugar way up. And then the next person, the same exact food, doesn't spike their blood sugar as much. So again, it's just so varied from person to person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like even just talking about the blood sugar, it still goes back to those refined carbs, right? So like just limiting those refined carbs is going to help you tremendously.
Absolutely.
What would be like, I mean, besides reaching out and, signing up for your program, which I know we're going to talk about, like what would be the place to start for people just like keeping a food journal and like seeing what you're actually putting into your body? What would you recommend?
Yeah. So obviously, working with a coach through a program is going to be the best so that the coach can work with you and tailor it to you. But I think if someone just kind of wants to start, I think doing a diary and just paying attention to the amount of carbohydrates that you're eating per day. So, checking labels of everything that you're eating. But the thing is, if you're checking a lot of labels, that means that you're eating a lot of processed food.
Right.
So I think really what this comes down to for someone wanting to start to change things is, again, going back to whole foods, just trying to incorporate as many whole foods in your diet as possible and just keeping these packaged barcode items to a minimum. And I think they'll start to notice, a difference. And, there's other apps out there. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of MyFitnessPal and stuff like that. So those are like okay ways to start tracking, just to be aware of the numbers in the food that you're eating, like the carbohydrates, the sugars. I don't fully trust some of these apps because some of the information might not be 100% accurate. Some of the apps, like people are allowed to, I think, like input their own stuff and their own numbers. So some stuff in the app might not be 100% accurate. And what I also don't like about, let's just say MyFitnessPal, is that you can kind of go in and say like, oh, here's my weight. Here's the weight I want to get to in this amount of time. And I feel like a lot of people use that as like, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds in the shortest amount of time possible. So then the app is going to put your calories really low, and it's going to be that low for like however long it takes you to get to your goal weight.
Yes.
But it's just not sustainable. That calorie number, you're not going to want to stay at that for the rest of your life. So those apps, I'm like, but it is a good way to be able to just be more aware of what you're eating. And again, just kind of looking at those carb numbers and, paying attention to that throughout the day. Yeah,
for sure. And just like portion wise, just being like, oh, wow, okay, that's what that looks like. That's what 4 ounces of meat looks like and how many calories and fat and all that. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think, definitely knowing what you're putting into your body is incredible. It's great insight that we have access to, which is cool. But yeah, I feel like those apps, they also are very generic in like what your height and weight and age should be eating. And like that is different for every single person. Like, I mean, what if you're like a triathlete or like, what if you sit on the couch all day? It's like, it doesn't put that into, even if you're putting in your activity, it's just, I feel like that's very inaccurate. Like everyone's metabolism is very different. So you can't go off of that. Like if you're hungry, you're hungry. It's not like if that's telling
you're so right.
Right. So I mean, take it with a grain of salt. Like, I mean, I think it's great and it's going to give you a lot of insight. But don't follow it to a T. I think having a coach is definitely so important. So Kayla, why don't you tell us a little bit about your program? And I know you said that you have something that you're offering this month.
Yes. So our program is completely customized to the client. We work with mostly women, but we work with men too. And we do work with a lot of people who do want to lose weight, but we also have a lot of clients that simply, just want to be healthier, or we have some clients that want to build strength or build lean muscle mass. So we have quite a variety of clients and we work with them, according to their specific goals. We do have fitness and nutrition options. So people can either do both fitness and nutrition together, or, say they're going to a gym and they kind of have their routine down there and they just want to do the nutrition program, that's an option as well. But again, everything is completely customized to them. We have our own app that we use where people are able to log their food right in there. And we can kind of go over it with them week by week. But a big thing with our program is the educational piece. So kind of like what I mentioned earlier is we want our clients to learn as they go so that by the end of the program, they have all the tools that they need to be able to succeed on their own for the rest of their lives. So Vin and I did want to offer the listeners of this podcast, if anyone is interested, $100 off of whatever program you choose. So whether that be if you're doing both fitness and nutrition or just fitness, just nutrition, we wanted to offer $100 off for the next 2 weeks. So that will expire, I believe, April 29th is what the date that we came up with. So 2 weeks from today.
Wow.
And I also will offer to anyone a free 60-minute phone call with me. And that's just to really go over a little bit more about the program, but more specifically the client's goals and what they are hoping to achieve and kind of figuring out if our program will be a good fit for them.
Okay. Wow. Kayla, that is huge. Thank you so much. That's an amazing offer. I mean, everyone should definitely take advantage of that. I can give you guys a quick testimony. I'm in the health industry and, I got a new doctor because we just moved here last year this was 2023. And so I got routine blood work done. My cholesterol came back through the roof. So my doctor calls me and she's like, you have to go on to statins immediately or you're literally going to have a heart attack. So I called you, Kayla, because I was like, I don't even eat processed food. I really don't. I'm like, I'm super healthy, but I'm like, I was panicking and I'm like, what do I do? And she's like, hold on, let me get you in touch with Vin. So I talked to Vin, I sent him my blood work and he's like, all right, first of all, Megan, slow down because yes, your LDLs are high, but look at your HDLs and look at your triglycerides and you are fine. You're not going to have a heart attack. You do not need to go on medication. And so he just helped me switch out a couple foods that are actually really healthy, but they weren't being healthy for me, at the time, which again, it's very, very customized. So he helped me switch those out. And within 6 weeks, I went back and I told my doctor, no, I don't want to go on medication. I want to just get retested in 6 weeks. So I went back in 6 weeks and got tested and my cholesterol had dropped from 200 points. So it was pretty insane just by switching out. It was 3 foods. That were not bad, it was actually just coconut products and ghee. I switched those out because they're higher in saturated fat. And and come to find out, high cholesterol runs in my family. My mom never told me. So it's hereditary and genetics, but so just talking to him, he was so informative and he just calmed me down, talked me off a ledge of I thought I was doing the right thing, but he's like, well, you are. You just, sometimes you just have to make little adjustments. And like you said, it's customized because something that's healthy for one person might not feel good to another person. And that's why, having that coach and having that support, really can guide you in the right direction. It was amazing. So take advantage of that offer and really cool.
Yeah. What's good about Vin is he has to talk me off the ledge for certain things all the time. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. But he's very science-based. He's going to go in depth about everything. And we've had a ton of clients who got blood work done and we literally send it right to Vin. He analyzes it. Mm-hmm. I don't think I mentioned in the beginning. So he has his PhD in nutrition and his major focus was metabolic health. Mm-hmm. So he knows exactly what to look for when he looks at people's blood work and, what numbers should be where and what they should focus on accordingly. So,
yeah, he's brilliant for sure. I mean, I love the science-based stuff that I'm in this industry, so I get it. But I mean, I feel like you guys are a really great team and you do a lot of great work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. One thing I wanted to mention, if people are interested, and either chatting more or taking advantage of the special offer, you could just send me an email directly. My email is Kayla, so Kayla at fitfilled.com, which is FITFILLED.com. But you could also check out our website if you do want to learn a little bit more about us, which is just fitfilled.com.
Perfect. And you're on social media as well, right?
Yes. So we have a Facebook page, which is called Kayla and Vin at FitFilled, and an Instagram, which is just at FitFilled LLC. So you can find us pretty easily if you just type in FitFilled.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to link that all below too. I'll put your email there and the offer and all that good stuff, so everyone can find you. But yeah, Kayla, thank you for clarifying all this information. I think it's super helpful, and just putting these resources out there to really help people. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
this was fun.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.